Hey everyone, hey, welcome to the channel. So, Loser LLM, here we are. I hope you like the logo. Uh, so basically, Loser LLM. Why Loser LLM? That's a great question. We're gonna find out. So, Loser LLM, because if everyone's a loser, no one is. I just think that there's a lot of hype behind AI and large language models, and I think it's easy to get overwhelmed. In fact, sometimes I even wonder if that's the intent. I tried to watch some videos on YouTube about some of these tools, and I just can't take all the excitement. It's just too much for me. And I really need it to slow down and go at a pace that I'm comfortable with because I can learn these concepts. I just have to do it at my own speed. And so my thought is that maybe there's other people out there that are just like me that aren't these like wizards when it comes to coding. Like I'm a loser when it comes to this stuff, basically. And I'm not ashamed of that at all. So I'm going to own it and I'm going to make everyone a loser because if everyone's a loser, then no one is. All right. So what's the goal for today? We've got a few things we want to cover. Starting out, I'm going to kind of walk through what my villain origin story is. So why loser LLM and what's the goal? And then losing sight of the shore. So we're casting our ropes off our little boat here and we're sailing out into the open water. We're hoping that there's going to be something out there for us to discover, and I think that there is. In fact, I know it. And then last of all, last but not least, we're going to be looking at our fat stack. So what does that mean? Well, in tech world, a stack for developers is essentially all of the tools that you use in like a sequential order to provide your service. So if you have typically there's like a front end stack and then a back end stack. And don't ask me like what where the cutoff point is between front end and back because I'm not really sure if anybody knows. So we've got two tools, and we're gonna talk about those two when we get to that slide. So let's jump into it. So all right, my villain origin story. So it's really not much of a villain origin story. It's not that big of a deal. But when I decided to really jump into the deep waters or shallow waters of learning LLMs and using tools like Gemini from Google, Claude Code from Anthropic, and ChatGTP, or really it's Codex CLI is their pair programmer tool. Um, when I got into all of these things, I didn't really know what I was doing, and I was just kind of playing around. And in my mind, I knew that it wasn't going to be free. I knew it was going to cost some money, but I was willing to bite that bullet because I knew that there would be learning that took place as a result of it. So yes, it did cost some money, and that's what I chalk that up to my villain origin story. But it was It was very valuable, either as a lesson learned or as things that actually came out of it of value. So on this slide, you can see I spent about $1,400 using Google Gemini. If you want I'll give reviews on these things on a different video if at all. OpenAI about almost $2,000. So over the course of June, July, and August, I spent this money. It was difficult to even find how much I spent with OpenAI. Again, they don't make it easy for you to find these things. Of course, that could just be a reflection of me. Who knows? And then our third one here, Claude Code. Claude's pricing model, and that's really how all this, why I even had to spend money on APIs or API, usage anyway. Um, and the funny thing is that all the pretty much for the most part, well, OpenAI's pricing model has changed significantly. Where if you have a pro subscription, you can use Codex CLI for free, basically. I mean, you have a usage rate, and you have like a rolling window, an hourly window that you can maximize, but then like you get cut off at a certain point, and then once that window resets, then your usage does too. So you kind of cap. You have this rolling cap, and then you also have a weekly cap total. That's the current process. It used to just be you just paid by usage, and so that was only a few months ago. I managed to spend $2,000 doing that. Right, that's crazy. And then on my Claude Code one, Claude has a great pricing model in that they basically only have that rolling window. So everyone is capped, and you have basically a 4 hour window, a 4 hour time period where you have you're allotted a certain amount of usage, and that usage resets at the end of that 4 hour window. So there were periods of time where if I knew my usage window was going to reset at 4 o'clock in the morning, I would stay up until I would burn it. I would go use as much as I could leading up to that 4 o'clock reset frame. Basically expend my in total resources, and then once that 4 o'clock window came, I would kick off a bunch of jobs and then I'd go to bed. I did that a few times, and that was the beauty of Cloud Codes because you didn't pay. It wasn't it's part of my subscription. It wasn't part of you don't have to pay separately for an API because when you're already and that's the other thing we'll see here in just a minute. But these services aren't free; they're not cheap. Okay, early transition there. Don't worry, let me segue here. So again, part of my villain origin story. Really, it's not anything villainous, or I don't know if that's even a word. So basically, I invented something. I got a patent in June, and I really began the work on this back in July, or no, excuse me, not July, but January, February timeframe, where I kind of had the idea and then really decided to pursue it in February. So here you can see I've got just kind of like here's my desk. So I've got all kinds of crap on here because I was when I was doing this, and again, as I, I invented a device that can be worn as a wearable strap that has constant tension applied to a line that whenever you inhale and exhale, it triggers a reading onto a sensor that's transmitted to an app on your phone. That's the goal, right? And so, in order to do that, in order to reach that stage, in order to like understand how a device like that would work, I literally had to invent this thing, right? I had to create it from scratch. And so what I did was I went to like Walmart and Lowe's and other hardware stores like that, and just bought materials, like things for me to prototype with. So I brought a Dremel. I bought all these different tools so that I could just take things apart. I've got like 20 tape measures, not even joking you, in a box somewhere and half of them I took apart or destroyed, just trying to understand how they worked and understanding what, like how different designs impacted the quality or the perceived quality of a tape measure, in my eyes. And then it's probably difficult to tell, but there's all kinds of tubing here that I had to experiment with different sizes and materials of tubing to house the fishing line, which is what I used initially to prototype. And then over here, I just think I love this stuff because it was so much fun to do. But I had to, with accuracy. Oh, yep, come on in. All right, we're gonna keep going here. So basically, each of these magnets rotates around the reel on the fishing on the tape measure, right? And so whenever these magnets pass by a sensor, the sensor determines, because there's two sensors, it can determine the direction of the rotation as well as the speed, everything you would want to know about your breath, right? The extraction and the retraction of this line from a tape measure. So that was the initial design, and it evolved. And this is not what I eventually patented. I mean, it's a similar design, but it's not the exact one. I wouldn't show it obviously here on stream. Not that it's a big deal, but just in case. And then here in the middle, you can see where everything is hooked up. And on the computer, it's difficult. You can't really read it. But down here, this was like a constant stream. I can't see my mouse. Okay, this right here was a constant stream down here of of a number that would change whenever I would pull this line out. And you can see that I basically put a tape measure here so that I could see how much line I extracted from the reel and then let it go back in, and I would watch the numbers just to see if it was like even within, if it was in ballpark field of what was like actually extracted. So it was close. It was ballpark. I mean, it wasn't perfect, but then again, I had placed these magnets that have to be exact degrees separation in order to correctly signal to the sensors that the precise amount of distance was traveled. It was not easy to do, but it was done eventually. And then down here, you can just see all of my different, my, gosh, I'm drawing a blank here. say prototype, but I know that's not the word. My patent forms. So all this paperwork that I exchanged with my patent attorney and so on. And the next one here. Then like after I completed all of the prototyping with the off-the-shelf parts, then I was like, okay, it's time to design what the body will look like and how it will house all the different components as it sits on you. So here's the free CAD drawing. It's just an STL file. I think it's an STL file. Could be wrong about that, but anyway, I also bought a 3D printer and I began by printing off all of my different. Like I started here after just kind of envisioning it, what it would look like, and then I realized that okay, I didn't like the finish here, so I angled it differently when it would print, and then I just began to test different sizes of things. And I had to make some adjustments because I knew that certain components would take up more space, and so we had to make accommodations for that. And then tried experimenting with things that I didn't know if I would need or not, but I was like, what if? And not everything like that panned out, but I ended up with this design here, and the justification for all these different sizes is because that's what it would take to house the components that we've been looking at previously. So this is an Arduino board, Arduino Uno, and we changed to an ESP32, which is like a Raspberry Pi variant, much smaller. So from there, here's all like the Claude code experience. So down here is my GitHub repo activity. So I would say the time frame for here from January until June was all spent on that prototyping, right? So trying to understand like what pieces would work, how would this device work, period. And then once I got into June, that's when I realized that okay, I think we're good. I proved the sensors worked as expected or as they should. And then it was like, okay, it's time to get into the app. So that's really where this work began. So if we want to talk about vibe coding, that's what this is here. So I'm no shame here. So basically, I had two ChatGPT windows open at all time, and anytime I ran into an issue with these command line interface, so it's CLI tools. So like a Codex CLI is like a ChatGPT that writes code for you, and then Claude Code is a similar thing. So if you're familiar with Claude Code or Anthropic, Claude Code is like the parallel tool, and then Google has their Gemini CLI tool that also does programming for you. And I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I just had like 6 of these things running, and my goal was just to keep them going as long as possible because I thought that they were actually doing something. And I could see that the material that it was creating, and it was, but it wasn't actually like working code. And I don't know if that was an issue with my ability to make requests to this thing to make something that did work the way that I expected, or if it was just because it was like honestly, I kind of wondered if it was like, if I were to ask this thing to make this for me and it just made it right away, that was it. I wouldn't need it anymore. So it kind of like I've always wondered if it would just get me to like almost, because it would fly through everything leading up to the finish point, and then once it was like almost done, it would be like okay, it can't work. It couldn't find a way around this one obstacle, and it was like why, or it would find another way around, and it would be never done, right? So that was unfortunate. So I think I learned from that, and then that kind of helped push me towards my goal of using completely local AI models, and then creating like a coding tool, my own version of coding tools, using another tool called Langflow, which we'll get into as well. And then down here, so when I first started on this path, I was just watching YouTube videos, and there's a lot of hype around this stuff, and it was just overwhelming for me. And I started thinking, because a lot of these content creators on YouTube, they just borrow content from other people, or that they're not they're open about it. Like they cite their sources, they shout out to whoever they borrowed from, and they link to their video. But it's like it comes at you so fast, and the transition, like imagine a camera is like coming right at your face when you record, and then like that's one thing that they'll say, and then they turn their head, and then it's another camera over there, and the camera comes right at them, and it's like this constant action sequence of, oh, an LLM can do this, it can do this, it can do this, but it's like, oh my god, just pump the brakes a little bit, slow down, let me figure this out, like let me try to learn. So when I kind of started feeling that way, I was like, you know what, let me get like, where's the source, where does this all begin, like who is the one who's actually coming up with this stuff and publishing these papers and all this other crap. And that led me to this guy called Andrew NG, and I don't know how to say his last name, but he's like he's the if you dig deep enough, you'll see that he kind of laid the groundwork for the Google paper that led to the creation of the agency, I believe, and it's like memory is all you need, or focus is all you need, or something like that. But he basically broke the ground on Google's, Brain Lab or whatever it's called, and he no longer works there. He started another website for learning and teaching it. Like I think I can't remember the exact name, but maybe that'll be another video. And then lastly, an Apple. So Mac, man, really was a game changer for me, and is when I went to the Mac store to go understand, why I should buy one for running LLMs. That was where I learned that you could do it locally for the first time ever, and that really changed the way that I went with this project over in the long run. So you can see kind of where my development it began June, July, went into August, and then kind of took a break here. And I wouldn't call it a break, but that's when my focus shifted from using those CLI tools that I get charged for, every time I use it, basically, to putting together a computer at home that would be able to do a lot of these things for me. Like I can run local LLMs, and so that kind of carried out to where we are today. And I just completed that whole project last week sometime, and so now I'm like, okay, what's next? Well, what's next was, we'll skip the quote for now, but my canceling my subscription. So this is losing sight of the shore, or how I labeled it, right? So canceling Claude Max, I literally just did this. If you were to go to my Twitch channel, you would see where I didn't show the screen, but I'm like talking through as I'm canceling my plan. So this is me saying, you know what? I'm going hands free, right? Or not hands free, but I'm stepping away from these paid APIs. I want to have a little bit more control over the things that I'm working on. I want to have a little bit more consistency, and I want to be able to just go crazy, basically, like find out what's possible. So here we just did this. We're casting away the lines. I'll come back to my quote here. I want to read this because my only maintenance guy was here, and I was like, man, that sounds like an idiot. But so I totally screwed my whole thing up here. But I was just going to deadpan this and be like, per a speaker or source, a short quote or key message lands here. And then cancel Claude Code. I'm losing my bead here, but that's all right. So then I canceled Chat GTP, just did that as well. And then that brings us to our fat stack. So it's kind of a play on words. So a tech stack is basically all of the tools. Like you got to do multiple things. Every single component that you have that you work with is considered part of a stack, right? And so our stack is going to be a tool called LM Studio that will allow us. It's really like it's a great way for us to download models from the internet, and then we can serve them locally. Basically, like it's a game where you download the game and then you load the game and you run it, and then you can interact with it. And then we're going to use another tool here called Langflow, and Langflow is like it's a visual, like think of it as building blocks, where it's like an erector set or connects or Legos, where you have these little components that you have, right? So imagine one of them is an agent, and then you can give this agent, you can provide it with all these different tools, so like MCP tools, or other things that it can so you can give it the ability to access the internet, you can give it the ability to write code, create files, save files, edit files, all of these things, right? And so what we're going to do is, and I've already watched a video on this that was hosted by Langflow, that basically they just created a version of Cursor, the Cursor IDE that you can plug in your ChatGTP or Claude Code subscription to, and it becomes this programming agent that has all these rules that it follows behind the scenes that were created by Cursor. Well, we're going to create something similar, and it's going to be totally open source in Langflow. And like I said, I've already seen Langflow created a video doing exactly that. And it's the beauty of this is that if we don't like how it works, we can change it, right? If it gets stuck on something, we can find another way. We can use a different building block. So that's going to be our stack for us. And then in future videos, we're going to walk through downloading these tools for the first time, no matter which operating system you're using. And then we're going to look into downloading a very basic model, and then we're going to look into connecting that with LangFlow. So that'll be probably the next thing we do. So that's all for today. Just a quick introduction about everything that's kind of led up to this point. Again, this is all streaming on the Twitch channel, so you can check it out there too, like the production behind the video. So thanks for joining, and we'll see you at the next one.